Thank you for that introduction. I hope that we taped it, because when you talk about inspiring leader and top executive, that's not the normal welcome that I get every day on. And the only thing you didn't mention is that I'm actually a farmer. So just to get it down to the earth, I have a farming background. But thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys. I understand that it's a different nationalities, so I'll guess we'll take it in English. I'll start to talk about, or actually I start to talk about what we asked you about. In terms of, I'll get back to that. We asked you what programs, what apps do you think that's going to be important for students in the year the next year? And here's the answer. I'm not sure if that's surprising. Pokemon, according to our statistics, that's really on the way down. So it might not be so relevant 1 year from now. Snapchat is important. The Bible is pretty high up, just you know. You didn't expect that. So that's it reflects a little bit about also how we work with our customers, that it doesn't matter what we do of analysis. Internally, we need to go out and ask and have a constant dialogue with our customers. So I'll get back a little bit back to that. But more importantly here is the next one. We asked you whether or not you use the mobile phone during class. And 8 out of 10 answered that you do. How many of you use the just do a survey here now. How many of you use your mobile phone as a part of the lecture during class? Not as private communication, but as a part of interaction with the customer, with the well, you don't call it teacher, but the presenter. How many would that be? Oh, there are some hands. That's actually a little bit surprising. That's good, because this was a debate earlier this year. This is not a professor from Bay, just to have said that, but he wanted to ban the mobile, and of course I assume that he was reflecting on the private use. I assume, but in Telia or any mobile operator, we are convinced that we're just on the brink, on the starting point of actually using the mobile phone. And I'm actually a little bit surprised that so many put the hands in the air when you reply that you actually use the mobile phone as a part of the interaction with the lecturer. If I've asked if that's more than 5% of the education, then I think it's going to be less, but I don't know. And that's good. But that's also the picture that we'll meet in all the companies. That's also the picture that you are going to meet when you start to work with companies. That the mobile phone, or as a tool, as an interactive tool, and is much less used than you use it as a consumer. It's much easier, and what you are going to meet when you go out is that you're going to be surprised, even shocked, about the level of how you use the mobile phone. Because you're natives, all of you, digital natives, all of you, and you're used to the mobile phone. When you come out in the businesses, you'll see that it's old versions. It's not integrated. It's much more complex. The security issues are much more imminent. It's a much more complex to change processes when you have 500 employees than when you are alone. And you can just look at your own family. I'm pretty sure that your mom and dad has a different maturity than yourself. So within the family, you don't start to integrate and use the tool the same way. And that is part of the future, what we're going to see also going forward. A little bit about Telia Norge, Telia Norway. We're a part of Telia, a company, stock listed in Stockholm. Telia Norge consists of these 4 brands. We have roughly 9 billion NOK in revenue. And I saw the overview the other day that we are the fourth largest IT company in Norway in terms of revenue. Pretty good bottom line. I guess you teach about you learn a lot about bottom line here, I would assume. We are about 1,400 people, give and take. It's difficult to count. It varies. Those 4 brands represent our market muscles. Telia, both consumer and businesses, and OneCall, Chess, MyCall is our consumer brands. And why do we? Just a quick reflection. Why do we have 4 brands? A is a part of history because we acquired Tele2, which consists of different brands. But B, it is about really make sure that we hit or target different segments with different needs. One example, MyCall is a very targeted brand towards very much the Polish segment, but the immigrant segments. So if we have one store and that store looks a little bit like NAV, a little bit like a social welfare office, because then you can come and get help for everything. As an example, it's a totally different operating model than the rest. Just as an example, this is a part of a portfolio thinking in Telia Norge. But let's move on. We enjoy life in Telia, at least most of us. I guess there are exceptions, but in Telia Norge. And why? We have half the population as customers. We have everything, everybody has a mobile phone. You have the world in your hand. It is the modern version of Swiss Army knife. You can do everything with a phone. The traffic is increasing. The business model is one of the best business models you've seen. So on top of that, I guess you have a lot of classes in competition. On top of that, we have a better network than our main competitors out in Snarøya, named a small company called Telenor. And so that's our starting point. So then, okay, so then we can just harvest, then we can just capitalize on that. Or is it a little bit more complex? And that's what I'm going to go a little bit more into. But first, this sky is the limit. Everything is growing. We have 4,000 times the traffic a few years ago, and 400 million times if you go 10 years back, increase in traffic. The traffic, it doesn't really matter what kind of denominator you use, it'll grow. We know. Half of the traffic is video, and it will, absolutely, for 100% sure, is going to grow. And that's a good starting point. So a lot of businesses are struggling with, will there be a need for our services or our products? This is not the case for a mobile operator. But moving on, there's a lot of changes will have a big, tremendous effect, not just on traffic, but how we build business models, how we build our value proposition out in the market, how we face the future. And the whole world is now written in code, or is about to be written in codes. And in this context, it's nice to talk to students at BI, because I mean, I have the same education myself, although it's several decades ago. So my education from that time, I think we were programming, we had some kind of valgfag, and it was programming in, I think it was called 4GL. I don't remember exactly. It's totally irrelevant now. Totally irrelevant. So the point is that my point here is that there's so big changes going on, exemplified with some of this stuff. If you look at the autonomous vehicles, there's no reason to believe that we a few years or 10 years from now will have so many cars. Most of us will not need a driver's license. Why should we? There's autonomous cars. Blockchain will change the financial sector totally. Robots and drones will totally change the way we do how we produce, how we deliver, logistics. Amazon is testing a lot on how to deliver goods with drones directly to your home. If you look at the robots and drones here, there's no reason why a few years from now we'll have a surgeon in Sydney making a surgery on a patient in Oslo just based over the network. This the big data stuff, which I will comment upon later, will enable us to do a totally different way of understanding how to make plans, how to make strategies, how to implement. We're used to making a very scientific way of looking at making protection. This is what we believe in. This is what the plans we were making, and then we make a program. Then we start to implement very much in a sequential way of looking at it. Future will be a much more in parallel. You'll test. If it works, you'll scale it up. If it doesn't work, you'll scale it down. You don't have individual analytical approach to a lot of stuff, and that's based on big data and aggregating a lot of data. If you look at an artificial intelligence, I bought to my wife. There's a Dino. I'm not sure if has anybody tried Dino. It's a toy from Cognitoys. It's linked to IBM's supercomputer, and you can teach it. So it's based on artificial intelligence. I bought one to my wife because I thought she could teach it and talk about her feelings, because then I could get some little bit. We could share the responsibility there. We're only halfway, but but it's really fun to see how you can interact with that toy, which is then again linked to Watson. The same Watson is what Oslo Universitetssykehus is now working on in terms of how do you do diagnosis. Who wants in the future to go to a doctor who had their education 35 years ago, instead of going to Dr. Watson, having an exact analysis of 30,000 patients with exactly that kind of diagnosis, and it can get a much better prediction. Not replacing the doctor, but having a much more sound way of making sort of diagnosis, as an example. This is just examples. These are, and the buildings will talk to us, will tell us when to do maintenance, when to do upgrades. That happens today, and the nanotechnologies, of course, has an enormous potential. These are influential factors influencing you guys, but especially talking from an operator point of view, has a big impact. In the center of that, we have the mobile operator, and then you have all these players with, you could call it software players, you could call it asset-light players, because they're absolutely changing the business models. They're changing the way of looking at business. This is the biggest hotel chain in the world, no assets. This is the most valuable taxi company in the world, no assets, nothing. Just revamped through business models. Everything we've learned has been changed over just in not many years, just months. We're talking about months or quarters. And then you have the other hardware players on that side. But in the middle, you need a network. And that's our job. So enable ourselves to be able to develop the society that we're talking about here. Getting a little bit down to earth, we are in the competition in Norway. Our main competitor is Telenor. And Telia has now the best 4G network in Norway. And these are the proof points. We can't just say it, we need to prove it. And it's proven by different tests both in terms of coverage, speed, and stability. That's the objective proof. But if I go out and ask, and this is a point for all of those of you who are interested in marketing, if I go out and ask the general Norwegian or somebody living in Norway, many of them would answer Telenor. It's not about objective facts. It's about perception. So even though we have the best network, our main task is to move also on the perception part. Telenor has about 150 years head start in terms of planting something into our head. And that's the task of the marketing sort of role. And that is an important element of what we're doing in Telia. Moving on, this is not going to be the most important in terms of what we are competing. So it might be that Telenor can claim that they, objectively speaking, have as good as or even better network as we have next year. Could be. But it's not important because it's going to, because of all the drivers I showed, there are other elements that's going to be more important in the future. In other words, there's a change ahead, and we need to have a very, very ambitious change agenda. Here somebody has, or Spetalen, for those of you who are familiar with that name, has a claim that Telenor will go bankrupt. I assume that that's a message also for us because we're the same type of player as Telenor. And also, we actually managed to have this one on top of that, on that one. That wasn't intention, that was a coincidence. But the point I'm trying to make is that we have a burning platform. And this is our burning platform. Anybody knows what this is? No? I think you know now. That's our burning platform. We're not in the Norwegian Championship. We're in the World Championship. Not because Google and Facebook and Amazon's going to come overnight, but they're building a very close relationship to all of you. You don't even think about it when you push agree, and if you don't push it, you can forget your iPhone. Mm-hmm. You can't. If you don't push it, you can forget your Google Mail. You have to accept it. Then you're accepting a lot of stuff. That's what they are doing in terms of building customer intimacy, customer relationship. That's going to be very long-term, very influential in terms of how we as a mobile operator develop our business models. These, so when we build internal sort of burning platforms or sort of reason for change, or talk to regulatory authorities, mobile frequencies is a regulated business. Then you very often go out and say, well, who are the Norwegian players and how can you rule the sort of through the competition laws and that kind of stuff in Norway? And then you look at what you can influence, and these guys you can't influence in the same way. So this is our burning platform. They are partners, very important partners of ours, but also competitors in the longer time. So there's a constant search for how to develop relationship to these guys. Example: Google is building 7,500 base stations in New York City. They're building a network in New York City. And ironically, they're building it based on old telephony boxes, this telefonkiosken in New York City. Why did they do that? They have, or 1/4 of the population in New York City does not have access to this kind of broadband, and they certainly cannot afford it. So they do it for free. And why and how and why do they do that? So they go out. So when Sukka comes up from, and you've been to a hockey game, at Madison Square Garden, you'll come up and you'll be confronted with ads for next game somewhere else, or for hockey gear, or whatever. That's the part of the business model. New York City will get a surplus of all that. That's the disruption from a mobile operator perspective. They're building a network based on different business model. When you pay, hopefully you pay, but when you pay or have your subscription, it's really based on transportation of electricity from A to B, and then we meter it. When we had the voice, it wasn't any question on what to do. You knew how to use the phone. You should talk or not talk. And then we had the number of minutes, and then we extended to SMS. That's a history. Then you extended it to data. It's still the same. It's electricity or electrons from A to B, and then you meter it in terms of gigs and megs, and you pay for it. And then you have certain other features on top of that. What these guys are doing have a totally different way of understanding and also attacking what is being transported on that network. Not the fact that you are transporting something, but what is. And that's the change, that the disruption that a mobile industry go through in terms of you knew what you'd use the product for before. Now it is unlimited. It's totally unlimited. Just think how you use the mobile yourself. And there is just imagination which prevents you from, as a business or as a consumer, so which prevents you from how how to use or how that can be a value for yourself. And this is part of what Google is doing. And this is the background for excuse me, the direction that we are thinking or that we are pursuing as a mobile operator. That we are a digital enabler. We are enabling all the disruption, all the changes, all the technology adoptions, everything which is going on. Then you have to have a network. And it's not, a network is not a static thing. It's a very dynamic thing. It's a very, first of all, it's a shared resource, so that meaning that if you are alone based on that or linked to that base station, you have tremendous capacity. If you are together with 500, it's a much less speed, as an example. But that's one thing. The digital enablement is one thing. The partnership is another thing. So that we work very hard to a much larger extent understand what is being transported on the network. How do you use it? How do you use it? And how can we link that kind of insight into new business models going on in the future? That is a change journey, which is a tremendous change journey, extremely exciting journey. And then it's pretty clear that you cannot have the whole value chain yourself, which telco has been used to. You have to engage with partners. You have to engage with different. There's no way that we will be the best to develop health services, financial services, utility services, or you name it. It's impossible. So our ability to link that insight and that content of the network to other players who are building specific services is key for our thinking. Two examples of what we're doing in small scale. Just the example. No isolation. That robot started, so you're not the only one attending school. These ones started, several of those started on school 1.5 months ago in Oslo, or in Norway, not only Oslo. What are they doing? They're representing sick children on school. So they're participating in class whilst the owner of the robot is in the hospital or away. Because socially, if you are away from your environment for, I think it's 5-6 weeks, I'm not totally into exactly how many weeks, but then you are starting to get disconnected from your social sort of group. So what they are doing is that they are representing so that these are the eyes and the presence of the patient who's in this hospital bed, and you can follow the not only what's going on from a teacher, but also in the social context with the friends. Extremely exciting. So they're enabled with our SIM cards, but not only that, we use our we use a mobile pant when you deliver your old phones, and you get a paid amount for that when you upgrade. Then we use part of that money to fund this for kids, as an example. So we engage not just to sell a subscription, but to engage in a different way together with different partners. Some of you, or many of you, have also seen the commercial. This is another example. Oslo Bycykel, urban infrastructure. It's not, and then you have seen the on the actual bike itself, you see Telia. That's not the point. The point is that together with them as a pilot, we put up sensors on the different bike, the different places where you can where you get the bike, to measure the air quality. To measure the air quality and enable that kind of information to you or to the rest of us living in Oslo, or it could be other cities going forward. Is that so exciting? Well, everybody talks about traffic accidents. There were 5 killed in the Oslo traffic last year. There were 185 casualties earlier than they would have had just because of air pollution. 37 times as many last year, just for that. So it's, you can imagine how you can not just give information about air pollution to me, but also make the city being able to plan in a different way. This is just a pilot. It's going to develop further. That's examples of how we will start to see different ecosystems emerge and how we interact in different matter. All of it with the intention of linking different value proposition, and out of that create new opportunities. More technical, we're building then, because this isn't just a marketing thing. We have to then build technological platforms so we can actually do it. And this, it's about the identity, how we can follow you as a user, not just a payer, but as a user across different platforms. You have data labs with big data and understanding, so that we can give you a recommendation 7 o'clock in the morning in the future saying, you shouldn't bike down that road, you should take that road, because this road is much more polluted today. I'm not saying that's a good example, it's just an example of how big data will be used. And then you have the actual connectivity itself, and then you have new services. Everything is linked into interconnectivity, or linked together, so that you can the little players can engage in a bigger ecosystem and thereby create new services. That's the connected society I showed earlier. That's how the whole society will be much more connected in the future. And that's also, by the way, you attend a university yourself. That's a connected ecosystem. There is a reason why Harvard and other ones put all the courses on the network, because you could look at the university as a collection of different services, and you can even question whether that's the best way in the future, because you have a lot of administrative stuff, that might not be the best way of learning in the future. It's the same thinking. It's a platform that is bundled that will be challenged going forward. You will see in all industries. This is an example how we, as an employer, with reference to the Internet of Things, are building also in a playful way. Because it's not about, we don't want to attract We don't want to attract you if you start with is to talk about your title. It's not about the title. It's not about all the rewards, that kind of stuff. It's about how you can contribute and how you can take part in such a great change with rewards. And this is a way that we're building a Lego. Everything is censored, and so if you move that car, a message will pop up on my telephone. You can drive the train with just with sensors and everything. It's a way of displaying how the different things are communicating to each other via the mobile network. It's an example of what's in the future going to make the surgeon able to make a surgery sitting in Sydney and doing a surgery on a patient in Oslo. Big data. That's a buzzword, but it's more than a buzzword. Just an example. This is the Easter traffic. So this is an example how we use it. So here you can see timing. It's an Easter, and you can now it's total Norway, but we could zoom it in as much as we want, and you can see how how we can use that for network planning, how the people move on what timing, so you can make sure that capacity, we can make sure, and also plan how we do operations, how we do production. It's a type of information, so you can say that, for instance, Hemsedal. I think half. I don't remember exact statistics. I have it here. This is a kind of fun fact. The 20 to 30 years, your segment went mostly to Geilo. Or those from when they come from Bergen. Those from Trondheim went to Oppdal. That's not secret. Those from Oslo very much went to Hemsedal, especially youngest ones. And in Hemsedal, they average slept 1.5. They went to bed 1.5 hours later, and they got up 1 hour later. So it means that they had half an hour shorter sleep than the rest. That's an example of what we can. This is what we can see from the network. This is exactly, and we made a different calculator to see what kind of people went to a football game at Ullevål. Then we can see, the most valuable customer of ours who went to Ullevål. He comes from Tromsø. We can see that they went to which pub did they go to afterwards. What kind of stores? They went to Sandvika. Most of them, those who did not come from Oslo area, mostly went to Sandvika as a part of the trip. This is just to give you a perspective of, not on the individual basis, this is nothing about of intruding the personal integrity, but big data. So we could, this is the type of information that we have in data network, and will be important to develop as an asset, but also taking into account the integrity, the personal protection, and that stuff, which will be extremely important in the future, and which we're very committed to. Just an example. And another example of how we work on creating customer experiences. Mobile operators are not known for good customer experience. A lot of you don't start now, but you can take it afterwards. But you'll probably have complaints on the billing. How do I understand my bill? This kind of stuff. But it's a very committed what we're working on in Telia, and they're very committed to really compete not on network, but the kind of experience that we can produce going forward. There's no reason why we shouldn't, when we go to Gardermoen, when we fly out, the history has been that we land in London, then you get the full price list. And it's extremely, and it says that, make sure that you know that it's extremely expensive, so please not use it. Mm-hmm. That has been our message as a mobile operator. And it has reflected also the business model, and so it's difficult to untangle, but that has been the message. That is part of the driver for Roam Like Home, is when you start to how do we create how do we create those kind of experiences that triggers the usage, and we thereby can get as much paid as because we are a financial institute or have a business model, but through creating value, not by limiting the use. So we're very committed to on all different accounts understand the customer journeys in all from A to B to C to D to everything, and understand that how can we then change those different parts that you are a part of when you become our customer or even customer of our competitor. So in this wrapping up from my side, looking at a little bit to you guys, because many of you probably have a job to go back to. This is a master program, right? So, looking for, and that's, by the way, that's also a different thing that we're going to see. We are used to look at ourselves as an organization, and we employ people. In the future, there's going to be a lot more out of the starting point is you as a talent, and then see how can you be linked, use your talent in different kind of organization at the same time. And the technology platform will enable that in a total different way. If you look at the lawyer company, the business model is that you are willing to pay a lot for the really expert, but you're not really willing to pay for the junior staff. So what you do, you pay for the whole thing because you go to one company. But in the future, you're going to see those experts have a different business model linked to a more back office thing across on the back office stuff, as an example. So this is applicable not only for us, this is applicable for all kinds of business models. Doesn't matter what company you're looking at. And in that context, we need the engineer. It's absolutely key. Everything will be more important to do a crossover between technology and business model. An engineer, by the way, it doesn't have to be a Trondheim engineer or an engineer by degree, but we need somebody with technical skills, technical knowledge. But also the crossover. And the next one is the business, the commercial. You find more of those people in this room, but also with technology crossover. So if I can give one advice to the extent that this has any value, don't get stuck in only the business stuff without touching or digging into understanding how technology will impact whatever task you're doing, because it's so imperative. And the next one is the hipster, the creative. We've recruited a lot from other companies, from Schibsted, different business mindset, different business model, challenge ourselves. We're not copying Telenor. We could have gotten more people from Telenor, and sometimes we do, but it's not about replicating what we did in the past. It is about looking what is necessary to build up in the future. So then we need the creative people. We need those who are challenging ourselves, those who are looking outside the box, but not only from ID perspective, but also execution perspective. Because there's no, Telenor could have said exactly the same thing as I've said here. We're not going to differentiate ourselves just through good ideas. It's also boiling down to execution. And then you need the execution based on not focused only on the last 10% of doing the thing right, but making sure that you're challenging yourself to do the changes and doing the right thing. And that's the people we would like to sort of also engage with in the future. And that's I would also encourage you to sort of really drive yourself in that way. Because if I look back on my education, it has been very valuable, but I can't really point at what is really the key learning now. It's a framework for learning. It's a framework for developing yourself, but that's what it is, in my opinion. So that's that was what I would had in mind. Any questions? Any reflections?
Anyway, thank you, Abraham. Very inspiring and interesting lecture. I think when you're talking to students at BIA, I think it's relevant to mention that in our strategy we have kind of summed up in 3 I's. One is of course impact, and our researchers have more impact now than before on international research and so on. The other is impact on teaching. So and that is where the digital, that is why you get all the hands up when you ask do you use the mobile phone as part of the teaching. And I think that will also, we have a lot of pilots, and in a couple of years or perhaps 1 year we will have much more of that. So if you come back in 1 year time, you will see much more hands up in there. And the third is impact on practice. And in order to have impact on practice as a student from BI, you have to be able to, or have to learn how to work in the same way as when you come out in practice. And that is something different from when you and I went to NHH a century ago. So the other I is international. And I think that digital and international is kind of the key words for doing business today, because when you go out from BI, you have to be able to work in a digital arena. You have to be able to handle all these tools, and if you look at the last figure you had with the businessman or the candidate from BI or NHH or whatever down here, I think that they will be more important because we have been good in developing technology, but now there's a new technology coming in and changing business models. And we have meeting with all the top management groups in the major industry companies in Norway, international, like Yara, like DNVGL, and everyone is challenged by digital technology in their business models.
Absolutely.
They have the technology for what they're doing, but the business model is changing. And the third is interaction. The third I is interaction, and that is also what you mentioned. Your success is kind of dependent on how you can engage in interaction with all the other companies that is supplying kind of content, and the reason why customers use Telia as their...
Absolutely.
So I think you are straight to the point, and of course this is also challenging both what we teach and how we teach it, and also how we run business groups. So, any questions, comments you had? Come there. Yeah. To the microphone.
Thank you for your work. Yes. Okay. Thank you for your inspiring presentation. Very interesting, and especially I like the slide where you showed that the technology and the big data will be ever pervasive in our lives. But on the other hand, security issue comes in about surveillance, about the privacy protection. Could you please comment about that?
That's a very good question, because there's it's important that we it's important to understand that even though we have our financial or driven by or stock listed company with a profit as a profit organization, there is no way we'll survive if we are not taking into account the important question that you're raising on the privacy protection. And there's an EU regulation going on to see how can we do it. And we have we're building lawyers internally to understand it. We're looking at the technology platform so that we are able to follow from A to Z and control that we actually have control of the information throughout the whole journey, because it's also that all the mobile or all the operators also have a lot of legacy systems which is not controlled from A to Z. So even though we are absolutely committed to it, it's sometimes difficult to see it. It's not about abuse, but it's about exposing ourselves for abuse. So this is very high on the agenda. And since I also come from a company who has recently been awarded with the biggest fine, or suggesting it's not concluded, but biggest fine ever for misconduct going back to 2007, with $1.4 billion in suggested fine, not Telia Norway, but in linked to Eurasia activities. I'm just mentioning this, that these are extremely high up on the agenda, because if you do a wrong thing here, you expose the whole brand, you expose the whole company. And that's it's so important. So we build competence on the legal side. We build competence on technical side. Of course, we are working a lot on ethics and conducts. We just recently, last week, launched new ethics and conducts, and we're doing a lot of training and linked to that stuff. So because there's no way we will succeed from a customer experience point of view if we don't have control over how we actually use our data and how we actually do something which is accepted by you as an individual, you as a customer.
Yeah. Any other?
But I mentioned also Google and Facebook. Huh? If you research your own activity when you accept every time you upgrade, how many reads all the terms and that is a part of it. So that's also a part of your. So we have to do that, even though you don't think about it. We need to work on that because customer is not aware of that.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
But how do you communicate those efforts that you make in policy protection? Because for example, what Facebook does now, they send you notifications that someone liked, for example, the picture and you're not friends with that person, don't you want to review your privacy settings? When a telecommunication company does something similar, for example, you have your new privacy policy update, how do you communicate it to your customers? Because as you said, no one actually reads those terms and conditions.
But if you have the similar type of apps as a Facebook apps, like a communication platform as Facebook is, then we would have the same type of, but we don't have that. So that's a partner thing. So for us, your need for that kind of social interaction platform is not a Telia platform, it's Facebook. But with the Facebook, but a different type of app, then we would have the same type of on-off type of thing. You can, and so the key, a driver will be how do we interact with you as a customer so that you switch on. It's okay for me that you share the data, and you would. If we asked you, is it okay for you that we share data in such a way that we could do better medical diagnosis, most of you would say yes. If you also say that if you do that, we'll provide you with an advantage. Either that's some kind of on the subscription side or whatever, then you would also say yes. But it's about you have to be set as a customer in the driving seat. Today, you're not. With Facebook, you're not. With Apple, you're not. You can say no, and then you can throw away your iPhone.
Other questions? I have one question for you, Abraham. You know, being a research-based school like we are, kind of a slow-moving business, and you are out there in a very fast-moving business. So, what are the challenges? What kind of advice or challenge would you give to us, as both us as a school and also to the students that you are going to recruit, hopefully in the future?
Yeah.
All of that.
That's a big question. I probably don't feel. I definitely don't feel competent to do that. But I think one of the from a education point of view, not from a research part of it, but from the education point of view, I think it is of utmost important that we bring in the tool and the reality also into the student setting. Not replacing the theoretical model, because we want people with conceptual minds, with conceptual way of looking at things. So it's not about just replicating practice, but it is to be able to combine that, because otherwise you'll have two gaps between what is reality and the real life, and what is the conceptual, aggregated, abstracted way, which is important, but it's the crossover which is important. So, and that also goes to you guys, that you know, when you read about the theoretical stuff, it's not theory out of nothing. It is abstraction of what is actually realized. So look for and search for how that can be applied or understood in a context. So what I told here about, you know, technology changes and all that stuff, it's really applicable for everything, for all the industries. Really applicable for what the customer experience, who hasn't a bad or a positive experience, who hasn't a relation to what happened when you really met a sales guy who impressed and helped you and gave you a good feeling. What happened then? What really happened? And vice versa. When you were annoyed, what was really happening? What could be the reason? And that is part of what the research and the educational institution try to give abstraction of from a top-down level, you could say, but try to apply it also from bottom up. I realized it wasn't the answer on the question, but it was an answer.
Can I chance to comment? Because what I think you are saying is that you need to know the disciplines. You need to know finance, marketing, and so on.
Yes.
But in addition, you need also skills, you know, to be able to be kind of employable when you get out of school.
Yeah.
And I think that is much more important. It was important when you and I went out from NHS, but it's much more important now. Yeah. International, for instance, it's outside the door. 25 years ago, it was either with Aker in Dubai or with exporting process with Jordan. Now it's everything is international.
If I was out to you as an individual, if I just use an example of how I've been thinking, it's not right or wrong. It might be wrong, but it's just an example. When I was finished on the specialization in financial management and international finance, went to Dyno, started with a lot of chemistry calculer and chemistry, sort of really cost base. Worked in finance management just to get that straight. Then went into sales, then went into business development. Then I've done operations. So I've been responsible for running the bank systems in Norway from a technical, and I'm not a technician. Been working in the finance, you know, as you mentioned, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it's a different roles and different disciplines. It's not right or wrong, and it's not about bragging. It's about different ways of trying to complete and trying to make sure that the next job, the next challenge, is not riding on what you know from before. The next job, the next challenge, the next one you're doing is challenging yourself and driving yourself further. Because the change competence is by far going to be the most important thing you're going to succeed with. By far.
Yes. So you have to come back and finish learn more. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Because you mentioned something about billing and prices, and I used Telia last year, and I wasn't satisfied because of exactly that. Because one day I was looking at my billing paper, and I noticed I was paying for a package I didn't even ask for. And when I told them, they like tried to kind of avoid it, and then I just switched. So you also mentioned the Telenor. Telenor is kind of cheaper compared to Telia, I would imagine. So do you plan to do something change a little bit about the prices, for example? I don't know. In order to like reach, no, I'm talking.
There might be a couple of changes going forward.
Like in order to reach like more people, because the operator I use now is like I pay less than I did in Telia, but I have more in a way, so it's more for the money.
That's how competition works. In general, we have a lower income by customers in Telia, meaning that you're objectively speaking you're wrong, but for you it's right because that's what you experienced. If you went and did a different check now, you would definitely see it differently. Not because I can say it generically, but that's also how the market dynamics will work. So that's the best way I can answer that. And then we have also the different brands, which also will have a different both package, both product, price, because you are different from you. That's the best way I can answer that. But I will urge you to come back to us, and I will take care of you.
Okay, time is running out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.